Right to be Read podcast, episode number 81. Interview with James Altucher. Are you struggling trying to figure out how to sell copies of your book, especially the first 100 copies? The Author Marketing Institute is offering access to their latest free video course called Selling the First 100 Copies of Your Book. This is the course everyone should have when they started publishing. It goes through all the basics from starting a mailing list to experimenting with different prices. If you follow the instructions in this course, you should be primed and ready to sell your first 100 copies, if not many more. Sign up for free at www.authormarketinginstitute.com.
You are listening to the Right to be Read podcast, and this is your host, Ani Alexander.
Hello everyone, it's me, Ani Alexander, and you're listening to the Right to be Read podcast, the podcast that inspires and encourages writers. Well, today is a very special episode for me because I wanted to interview this person since a long time, but I didn't have the courage to approach him because of the self-doubt, insecurities, and many other nonsense that keeps us from amazing things that may happen to us in life. So I finally one day got the courage and wrote him a Facebook message, and I'm really glad that I did because today I will be talking to James Altucher. For very few of you who don't know who James is, here is the short bio before we start. So James Altucher is a successful entrepreneur, investor, board member, and the writer of 11 books, including the recent Wall Street Journal bestseller, Choose Yourself. He has started and sold several companies for 8-figure exits. He is on the board of a billion revenue company, has written for the Financial Times, the New York Observer, and over a dozen popular websites for the past 15 years. He's run several hedge funds, venture capital funds, and is a successful angel investor in technology, energy, and biotech. He has also lost all his money, made it back, lost it, made it back several times, and openly discusses how he did it in his columns and books. So let's start the interview, and here we go. Hello, James. I feel really honored to have you on the show. Welcome to the Right to be Read.
Ani, I am so happy to be on the show. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, exactly,
Good.
Ani. Well, thank you for coming once again. And I would like to start our conversation from something I recently read on Facebook as your status. And it kind of explained a situation which I really related to, which kind of told the story when you just left the office and never came back. So can we talk about that first? Like, what led you to that extreme stage, and what made you make this risky step and just leave all behind?
Well, okay, so what happened was I was in a meeting. I'll describe specifically what happened and then kind of a little bit of the background. But specifically what happened was I was in a meeting and I was really bored out of my mind in the meeting, and I had some other problems and issues with kind of the boss. And the other thing that had happened was the day before I had fallen. So I was going to lunch with my coworkers, and I don't know what happened. I fell straight down, which had never happened to me before, and I really hurt my leg. So I was kind of just spending the day limping around. So I limped into this meeting, and I was bored out of my mind, like I said, and I stood up to go to the bathroom, and I honestly thought I was just going to go to the bathroom and come back. But I ended up just walking to the elevator. I left behind everything in my office, like I had books, I had a coat, my name was on the office door, and I took the elevator down, about 50 stories down, and I took the subway to the train station. I took the train 70 miles north to where I lived, and I never went back to the office, and I never responded to any phone calls. I never responded to any emails. I never talked to them again. I just simply quit my job. And, a lot of things kind of led up to that. One was I took the job thinking it was very exciting, but when I wanted to have concrete discussions about, what my bonuses would be given if I brought in certain business or whatever, the boss would always say, James, just trust me. And, life doesn't really work like that. Like, I trust mostly, the people I love and the people who love me, but I'm not going to trust a random guy who hires me. The genesis of the word boss comes from the Dutch word baas, which means a master of slaves. So I'm not gonna trust my master to always tell me the truth, particularly when I don't even really know him that well. So that was making me feel uncomfortable. And what does that mean? So suddenly, all these things were happening. Like I fell and hurt my leg. So now my body was in pain. And then him saying this, I felt like, again, my body was like nervous. Like I didn't really feel comfortable. And then I was in this meeting, a meeting that I had set up actually. I was in this meeting where I was really bored and I didn't feel like I was contributing much to it, even though I had set up the meeting. So all of these things together, I felt like instantly, this is not the right situation for me to be in. And so it's one thing when you give up some salary, you give up, I'll take a very simple example. $20, if I lost $20, I could always make $20 back. That's not a big deal. Money is not the end of the world. Even though money is very important, that's no doubt that money is very important, but it's not the end or the beginning of the world. But if I lose 20 minutes of my life, I will never, ever be able to rewind the clock. I will never get 20 minutes of my life back. So I got up and I quit. And I spent more time with my family, and I spent more time with my brain coming up with ideas. And ultimately, I was able to make more money in situations where I loved the people around me instead of was nervous about the people around me. So I find that often people stay in situations where their body is already telling them, please leave this situation. But they think to themselves, no, I have a mortgage to pay, I have kids to pay. I had all of those things too, by the way. And so their mind, their brain convinces them not to listen to their bodies, what their bodies and emotions are telling them. And I think that's not such the best way to live.
Yeah, well, I agree with you completely because, I waited until I developed neurosis until I actually did resign finally. And I have a feeling that, like you said, the good things started happening just after you got the courage and did that and made that step because, many things weren't happening because that space was occupied by the job I had. So did you experience new beginnings and your risk was rewarded, I suppose?
Always. And so I do what I call I call it my daily practice. So important to that is every day I try to stay physically healthy. Every day I try to be around people who I really respect and trust and love. Every day I try to exercise my idea muscle. So I write down 10 ideas a day. And I call it a muscle because I'll use as an example your leg muscles. Let's say you get in a bicycle accident and you have to stay in bed for 2 weeks. Well, your leg muscles will atrophy so quickly that you'll actually need physical therapy to walk again or to help you walk again. And it's the same thing that happens with the idea muscle. If you don't exercise the idea muscle every day, it'll start to atrophy. But if you do exercise it every day, within a few months you become an idea machine. And I always have faith that if every 6 months my life is going to be completely different, so different it's unpredictable. Like I cannot possibly predict where my life will be 6 months from now because I'm constantly having ideas about every aspect of my life. And finally, the fourth aspect of health that I try to practice every day is I try to be grateful for what I have and not complain or blame or regret or feel anxious, but very quickly your body will tell you if you're in a situation where there's some regret, there's some anxiety, there's some worry. So, not to eliminate all anxiety in life, because some anxiety is healthy for you, but if it's too much, anxiety points you in the right direction. So in this case, it was pointing me, among other things, it was pointing me to leave this job and find better situations. And so, yes, maybe there was a period where I was working on ideas, but then ultimately I found much better situations. A situation, for instance, that leads me to be on this podcast with you right now. I wouldn't be on this podcast with you if I had kept that job.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be making this podcast either if I kept my job, actually. Yeah, true.
Yeah, so ultimately, jobs are kind of a very small subset of ways to make a living. And notice the phrase, make a living, make a life. A life is much bigger than just a job. And ultimately, a life is short. We only have one life. Even if you believe in reincarnation, our life right now is the most special thing we have. And so a job is only a small part of that. Now, you have to make an income to support a family, but there are many, many ways to make an income, not just one 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with that. And I know that you tried many different things, and I know that you also have failed many times and got back to your feet again. So let's talk about failure. Do you think that there is such thing as absolute failure, or each one of them brings in something new and leads you to something else?
I don't think there's such a thing as absolute failure. And in fact, so I've started many businesses and most of them have failed. Maybe I've started 20 businesses and 17 of them have failed. And I've invested in many companies. Some do well, but most fail. But I think there's too much what I call failure porn on the internet. Like, oh, you have to fail to succeed. Or failure is good, so now you've paid your dues. Mm-hmm. Well, failure really, really sucks. It's like painful to fail. I don't like it. I would never wish it on anyone. I don't recommend it for anyone. And I hope I never fail at anything again. Like, I really like success much better than I like failure. So I think much better is to set yourself up in such a way that failure becomes strengthening for you. So, for instance, just changing the language of it. Like, don't call failure a failure, call it an experiment. Mm-hmm. So, when I start a company, it's an experiment. When I start a new job, it's an experiment. The experiment might work, the experiment might not work, in which case I'll try another experiment. Life is not, the universe itself is not universal order. Chaos is kind of the natural rule of the universe. So it's going to be natural that you experiment many times before you find things that work for you. So we kind of grew up thinking there's a straight line. Like, we go to school, we go to college, maybe we go to grad school, we get married, we have kids, we stay married forever, our kids are great, we get a job, we get promotions, we build up some wealth from the promotions, and we retire and travel the world and then die. That's kind of the straight line path, but that never really works. That's just kind of a myth, but it's the myth that we all sort of grow up into, and then we get disappointed when the myth doesn't work out. When the reality is, every step of the way on that myth, on that straight line path, every step of the way is an experiment. Okay, maybe I'm 25 years old and I get married. Well, that's an experiment. It might not work out. By the time you're 30, you might not get along with the person you married at 25. So, okay, now you get a divorce or you separate and you move on to the next experiment. Or, I'm not encouraging that, I'm just saying that as an example. Or you have a job at 22. Maybe you're a lawyer. Well, by the time you're 28, you might decide, oh, the law is really boring, or I'm ready to be a painter. And so now you try something new. It's another experiment. That experiment might not work. You might be a horrible painter, but at least you gain this life experience. And now that you've done law and you've done painting, maybe you can be, I don't know, some combination of that, like an agent representing great painters, or you can be an art collector or whatever. There's ways to intersect your interests to come up with new interests. And that's how life is. Life is kind of this experiment where we add and subtract and merge ideas and come up with new ideas.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling that if you look at it from that standpoint and, look at it as an experiment, then everything kind of looks more positive and easier. And most probably people won't get disappointed at the very first thing that didn't work out, if you look at it that way. So let's say someone has written one book and then the second and the third, and none of them became a bestseller. Many would get disappointed at that point and maybe even stop writing. So what has been keeping you trying again and again and standing back to your feet every single time? What have been driving you forward?
Well, in the 90s, I was really interested in computer science. So I went to graduate school for computer science. And then I lost interest and I became interested in writing a novel. So I wrote 4 or 5 novels, and none of them got published. They were horrible. I was in my early 20s. I was young. I didn't write well at all, I don't think. But I kind of maybe gained experience writing. So I would constantly go back and forth between computer science. I set up a software company later, but then also I was interested in writing. So I worked for an entertainment company. I tried writing in different ways. Finally, I got interested in other things. I got interested in financial media, and I created a financial website using my background in software, but I would write articles. So I started writing about finance. So I'm combining all my interests. And this is over a period of, first 10 years, then 15 years. And then I started being interested in writing more about my own personal experiences and my own stories. I would say and then I started publishing books. I started writing books that got published, and maybe my 8th or 9th book became a bestseller. And now when I write books and when I write articles, they're generally read by a lot of people, and but it took a lot of pain and suffering. Not that I needed to have pain and suffering. I should have just kept, writing and mastering a craft. But eventually, it takes time and persistence. I always say persistence plus love equals abundance. So if you love what you're doing and you're persistent at it, eventually you'll have abundance at it. Now, if you take out any part of that equation, you won't create abundance. So you might love something. I loved writing in 20 years ago, but, if I had just, didn't learn, or if I had stopped writing after the first attempt, I would never have abundance at it. You have to have persistence. Now, what if you don't have love for what you're doing? Well, then ultimately, the person you're competing against people who do have love for what they're doing. So the person who has love for what they're doing versus the person who doesn't have love for what they're doing, eventually the person with love for what they're doing wins and will succeed at it.
Yeah, agree, totally.
And by the way, if you don't find abundance at what you're doing, you'll eventually stop doing it, because much better to do things. You'll fall in love faster with things that you have abundance in.
Yeah, absolutely. So success means different things for different people. And I would like to find out, what is success for you specifically? Or does it change periodically? I mean, do you reevaluate that?
Yes and no. Success for me means today I physically am healthy. Today I spend time doing things I love doing with people I like being around. Today I'm creative, and today I'm grateful for what I have. Because the best predictor of a successful tomorrow is a successful today. That's the only predictor of a successful tomorrow. So success for me only means I'm successful at what I'm doing today. I don't even think about success tomorrow. I have no goals. I have no hopes for the future. I only have hopes for today, because I know that means good things will happen tomorrow. I have no way to predict what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's senseless for me to make a goal that I'm only going to be, I'll most likely be disappointed in. I don't set myself up for a disappointment. I only focus on having a successful today.
Yeah, I see. So, and since you've had ups and downs, and you've been in both situations, when you've been up and you had your best periods, did that change you? Because I've been meeting people recently who are kind of, the success kind of gets to their head, and they get a bit disillusioned, and they change a lot from what they were. So did success change you somehow, or you're the same person you've been many years ago?
Well, I think I changed a lot. So one time I sold a company and I made a lot of money, and I think I became very arrogant, and I spent all the money. I lost all the money, and then suddenly, instead of being very happy and being very arrogant, I was very depressed and very suicidal. So I changed quite a bit as a result of success, both in both directions. And so now I try to be more even. So, a couple weeks ago, something very good happened to me, and that's fine. I'm very even about it. I didn't need to celebrate it. It was just a natural course of events, and I still work hard at making sure things continue well. And almost at the same time, something really, really bad happened to me, and I was depressed about it for a day. But then I said, okay, what can I learn from this? What did I do wrong? How could I have interacted better with people? How could I have gotten out of this situation earlier? And also, I tried to learn from it and keep it even. If I regret and stay in pain, what's the point? Again, I can't make back the time. I can't make back the money. I can make back the money, but I can't make back the time. So much more valuable to me is to focus on ideas and get rid of regrets.
Mm-hmm. I see. And as you already mentioned, you've published many books, and as far as I know, you've seen the both sides of the story, and you've been traditionally published as well as self-published. So which is the way you prefer, and why?
Definitely self-published, because the only good thing there's two good things about being traditionally published. One is the publisher gives you some money called an advance, but advances are going down every year. The average advance goes way down every year. And then the other thing a publisher gets you is distribution in bookstores. But, now every year Amazon and ebooks sell more and more. So more ebooks are sold than non-ebooks. And even paperback books, I think something like Amazon sells 41% of all paperback books, at least here in the U.S. So there's more and more ways to get books than bookstores now. And so you don't necessarily... Traditional publishing, though, hurts you in many ways. For instance, I have no control over the marketing. I have no control over the title. I have no control over how the book's edited, or I have no control over how the book's designed. So having control over marketing and pricing is critically important to sales. The publisher doesn't care about you. They only care about how much the book is going to sell. But when I publish a book, I'm thinking about my overall, relationship with an audience, and that relationship is going to continue not just with this book, but with other books, with other writing, with other methods. So there might be many ways I might want to communicate with my audience, and a traditional publisher blocks you from the audience and blocks you from communicating with that audience. So I find traditional publishing to be horrible. And in fact, my first book that made the bestseller list was a self-published book. And you might think that self-published books aren't as good as traditionally published books, but most traditionally published books are pulled out of the pile by people who are not qualified necessarily to say which books are good and which books are bad. And in fact, the statistics show that on Amazon, at least, self-published books actually rank higher than most traditionally published books.
Okay, guys, let's stop here just for a few minutes, and I would like to let you know that I have a new sponsor who's got very important message for you. So we will stop here just for exactly 1 minute, and you will listen to their message, and then I'll get back to you and we will continue the show. Deal?
Did you know there's a new place to sell your audiobooks besides ACX and Audible? There is, Buck Books. Authors, I know most of your audiobooks are sold exclusively through ACX, but on any new books you have, a one-day sales pit stop at Buck Books is a no-brainer. When your narrator finishes your audiobook, send us the files and we will feature it to tens of thousands of our active subscribers and growing for one day only. You get some great sales, and the very next day you can upload it exclusively to ACX. This is a great way to help offset the cost of production on a new audiobook and start building a strong relationship with the world's hottest free book promotion service, Buck Books. Not sure how to go about getting your book made into an audiobook, or having trouble deciding if audiobook production is right for you? With an audiobook team of 10 and the lowest production cost around, Buck Books is ready to help you finally add this lucrative format to your author portfolio and sell it too. For more information, send an email to john@buckbooks.net. That's John, John, @buckbooks.net.
Okay, now we're back to the show, so let's continue with the questions to James Altucher. I was just wondering, coming up and ending up with a professional book as a result, how affordable is it for newbie writers? Do you think anyone can end up with a professional book as a result, or there is a big investment involved in that?
It depends, because you can do it in several ways. For instance, Amazon has a division called CreateSpace. So you can basically upload a Microsoft Word file, have it turned into a paperback and a Kindle. You can pick out a cover, and they have like a million choices you can pick as a cover. You can pick out your title, and then you have a book published. That's as easy as it is, and it costs you $0.
Mm-hmm.
So, or you can hire a designer to make the cover. You can hire an editor, you can hire a marketing company, but those things are not necessary. If you have a novel sitting in your desk that you would like to publish, all you got to do is upload it and it's published. And I always think the best way to market a book is to write a second book. So, and that's free also. It's just your time, which obviously you can't get back, but if you love writing, then that's fine.
So how do you keep staying so productive? Do you have any specific writing routine, or what keeps you stay productive? And besides, working on your idea muscle, of course.
Well, okay, so I'll just take the past day. So I write every single day. And, yesterday I ate, it starts off, you have to have a good night's sleep. So you have to sleep like whatever your natural rhythm is, but mine is like 8 or 9 hours a night. And so to have a good sleep, you don't really want to be digesting food while you sleep. So I eat at least 3 hours before I go to sleep. I don't watch TV before I go to sleep. It gives me a chance to go to sleep early. And then I wake up very early. I woke up by 5 a.m. this morning. It gives me 2 hours to read, and when I'm reading, I'll read a combination of fiction and nonfiction. So I'm learning something from the nonfiction, but I'm also getting a taste of really good writing from the fiction. And then I start writing, and I might write about an experience I had, or an experience I had a long time ago, or something that I learned that I want to share in my own particular way. And then I write. And 70% of what you write is going to be bad, no matter how good you are. So you have to give yourself permission to write something bad. And then usually I publish. And usually when I publish, I'm nervous. Will people like this? Will people not like it? And you have to get over that feeling. So you keep on publishing and not being so anxious about your writing.
Okay, so you're still nervous. It doesn't go away.
Never goes away. I published 5 minutes before we started this podcast, and I'm nervous that it's good or not.
Amazing. I was just, okay. I thought that with the time, people get used to that, but apparently not.
Maybe some people do. I'm not only speaking for myself. I'm nervous every time I hit publish. I'm nervous because I always try something new every time I hit publish. And if I'm not trying something new and trying something that I think is different from everybody else, then I feel my writing will get boring. And so I'm always nervous when I'm trying something new. Whenever you do an experiment, you're hopeful that it works, but you're also nervous that it doesn't work.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about that. I mean, many people kind of, take creative classes. They kind of try to stick writing in the genre which sells well and try to fit into the things which are kind of, accepted and liked and etc., etc. So while some others, like you mentioned, try to be different and original. So should one have any balance between those two, or what's your approach about this?
That's a good question, because yes, if you write in a popular genre and you write a good book in that genre, you'll be successful. But I think the key is to focus on being a good writer, improving your skills at writing, because then the genre will find you. Like, you take a writer like Stephen King, okay? He's a very popular writer, and he sold, tens of millions of copies of his books. He's not always a horror writer, but that's kind of the genre he falls in. Some of his books are not horror at all, but they're still in that genre. So is he a genre writer? I don't know. I think he just writes about what's important to him, in particular, his approach is he writes about things that scare himself, and then his imagination takes over, and then he writes a successful book. Now, some people like Stephen King, some people don't, because they consider him a genre writer. But the fact of the matter is, he sold tens of millions of his books, so many people think he's a successful writer, and many people enjoy his writing. Ultimately, the goal of whether you're a good writer or not is if people enjoy your writing. So, else why are you writing? If you're writing just for yourself, that might be fine. But then you have a different approach to writing than someone who's trying to write for millions.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned improve as a writer. How do you do that? Besides writing every day, what else can one do besides reading and writing every day?
Nothing. The only way you can improve as a writer is by writing and reading every day.
Okay, fine. Because I didn't know any other ways. I wondered if there are some. So, no.
I mean, a lot of people think they have to have experiences to write. And that may or may not be true, but, much more important than the experiences is writing and reading every day. Now, you may say, okay, well, I'm going to go to a war-torn country and write about the stories I see there. So that's journalism writing, and it's a different style of writing. And some people kind of they have more fun experiences. It's not quite journalism, but they write about those experiences. So that's writing too. But I really think the most important thing is just writing a lot. Every word you write, you'll get better at writing. Every word you read, you'll get maybe a little bit better at writing. So let's say every word is worth 100%, and every word you write is worth 100%, and every word you read is worth like 50%. So that's how you get better at writing. And then maybe experiences are worth like 10%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. And you have mentioned that sincere voices will always rise to the top. And I would like to touch that point, because there are many people, myself included, who have difficulties kind of opening up and putting yourself into a vulnerable situation of, being completely open and honest and, finding your sincere voice. So what would you advise those who have trouble doing that?
There's a couple things. One is, let's look at what's bad first, and then we can talk about what's good. So what I consider bad writing is someone who says, okay, here's an article, 10 ways to be a better leader. And they're writing from like the mountaintop, do this, 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 and this. Here's the 10 ways to be a better leader. That's bad writing to me. I want to know when somebody was a horrible leader, and then this is specifically what happened to them to become that they improved. I want to hear their stories. Writing is about storytelling. It's not about lecturing. So I don't want to hear anybody who's just writing from a pedestal. Here's how you be a better, leader, or a better this or a better that. So storytelling is an important part of writing, what is storytelling? Well, you're telling your own truth. You're either going to tell something that's false or you're going to tell something that's true. Well, then you could say, well, what about fiction? Isn't fiction telling something that's false? And the answer is no. Fiction is, there's a great quote, fiction is a lie told truthfully. So let's say someone writes a book, and in the first chapter of the book, I know a friend of mine wrote a book like this. The first chapter of the book is this little boy is kidnapped by someone who sells him into sex slavery. So this may or may not have, this didn't happen to my friend, but he told this story because this was his worst fear. So he's telling an important truth about himself in the form of fiction. And throughout the book is different truths that he feels come out. None of these things are true, but it's his own way of telling his own personal truth about what his fears are, about what his views of different people are, and so on. So for me, I don't write fiction, I write nonfiction, but I tell stories about very intimate, personal things that have happened to me because people, not that people want to know so much about what happens to me, and this is where, practicing writing comes in, but I tell things in such a way that people could maybe relate. Okay, here I had this business that didn't work out. Here I had a job that didn't work out. Here I had a job that I got so sick and tired of, I couldn't stand another day of it. Here I had a marriage that didn't work out. Well, a lot of people can relate to that. So I tell the story of what happened to me, but in such a way that other people can relate to. Now, how do I know other people are going to relate to it? I don't really know, but this is where practice comes in. You practice reading and you practice writing.
I see. And how do you deal with...
So if you're afraid, Ani, of telling something that's deeply personal to you, well, maybe you can tell stories of other people where these things happen to, and that's how you tell like a personal truth. Or you could write fiction, or you just figure out some ways to sneak your own personal truth into a story, but always be storytelling.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's what I enjoy reading myself too, because I understand that landing a guest post when you're writing, a list post, let's say, with bullet points, it's much easier to land such a post. But on the other hand, I just hate writing those. So because I hate reading those, as you mentioned as well. They are kind of very, people just go through the bullet points and that's it. They don't even read the post themselves.
Yeah, well, people tend to read like the letter F. So they read the title, and then they might read the bullet points underneath until they stop reading. So that's, to engage them a little bit more than the letter F, you kind of have to tell a story every line. You kind of have to have a cliffhanger every line.
Yeah, exactly. So what about, let's say, I mean, I'm seeing that you've been doing many different things. I mean, apart from the writing, you do many different things in life. So first of all, how do you manage to do all this at the same time? And because it's those are like different projects, and time wise and attention wise, I don't know how you manage that. And why did you decide to do many different things and did not pick just one?
Well, I kind of just do, first off, you have to do what pays the bills for you and your children and things like that. Although most people live higher lifestyles than are necessary, there's probably cheaper ways to pay the bills for many people. But for me, I do what things are interesting. So if someone or something interests me a lot, then I'll get involved in it. Whether it's a business or a book idea or a post or an article or anything. I like to share my knowledge of, so I have knowledge of business and I have knowledge of writing and I have knowledge of technology and I have knowledge of entertainment. So I like to share my knowledge that I have in different endeavors. And then I just keep going. Just, again, I never can predict tomorrow. I may never get involved in anything new again. But my assumption is if I just keep doing things that are interesting to me today, fun things will happen. I'll give you an example. Can I give you an example?
Absolutely.
So today, something interested me. I decided, just for the fun of it, I'm going to take a very popular book and I'm going to hire somebody on freelance.com to take this very popular book and change every word but keep the same story. So if the words were, Jane ran to the store, I might change that to Christine walked quickly to buy, her clothes. So I'm going to basically, it's just for fun. I'm going to see if I can essentially just use have someone use a thesaurus to rewrite an entire book. So it's the same book, but just every single word's rewritten. So nobody can say this is plagiarism. And if I load that book to Amazon, what will happen? It's just an experiment. So that's what I just had the idea to do it today. I found someone in India who extremely cheaply will do it by Monday. So I'll have the book finished by Monday. And then I'll use CreateSpace for free to pick out a cover. And I'm going to make, what I do is I'm going to make for $5 each Facebook ads to test out 10 different titles. So I came up with 10 different titles and I made ads for them on Facebook, and I'll see which title people click on the most. I'll know by tomorrow which title will be the most popular title. And by Monday, I'll have the book. I'll load it up on CreateSpace, make a paperback in Kindle, and then I'll have a book finished. And then as an experiment, I'll see if the book does well or not.
Interesting.
And then either the book does well, and then I came up with an idea for a business, or the book doesn't do well, and I'll write a post about the experience. And either way, I win.
Absolutely. So, and I presume the book you're using is a successful one?
Yeah, sold millions of copies.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Well, great. And how do you deal with feedback? I mean, doing ads and getting the most clicked title is the practical part of it. But how do you deal feedback about things you're doing from, let's say, readers? How much importance do you give to the feedback? Do you kind of consider it and change things along the way, or it's just something you read and pass?
I just read and pass, because most people read something and I hope they like it, and maybe they comment, maybe they don't. Some people read and maybe something is going on in their life that they're very angry about, so they make a comment that's angry at me. So I find that very few comments are worthwhile. The only worthwhile comments are constructive criticism, where someone says, this could have been more helpful if you said this, this, and this. And then I might consider, is he right or is he wrong? Or is she right or is she wrong? But I wrote an article about the situation you described where I quit this job. And I wrote that article up, I put it on LinkedIn, and someone commented, this person definitely has clinical depression. And I do not have clinical depression. I'm a pretty happy person on the whole. And I noticed this person, her job title was, she was an executive assistant in some business. So I'm not saying anything about her job, good or bad, but she clearly wasn't a doctor or a psychiatrist or someone who can prescribe clinical depression, which is a weird prescription anyway. It's very hard to analyze and say this person has clinical depression. Even a psychiatrist can't do that, so easily. So this person was just off the cuff, obviously maybe angry about something in her life. Maybe she really wants to quit her job, but she couldn't. So she's angry at me for saying I quit so easily. So she says this person is suffering from... She didn't say this person might be suffering from clinical depression. She said this person is suffering from clinical depression. So I wrote a reply, which I almost never do. I almost always ignore bad feedback. But I wrote back a reply, and I said, thank God, finally someone has diagnosed me. Thank you. And I just did that for fun. But, most of the time, I don't respond at all to any feedback, because most feedback is really about what's going on in the other person's life, not what's going on in my life.
Okay, I see. And what about your interaction with your readers and your followers? How do you deal with that? How much time are you spending with interacting with them, and how do you prefer to interact?
Well, every Thursday I do a Q&A on Twitter. So later today, for instance, from 3:30 to 4:30, I'll do a Q&A on Twitter where people can ask me any questions, and I try to answer all of the questions I get asked. So that's almost like having office hours on the internet. A lot of times people send me emails, but it's hard to respond to, say, 100 or 200 emails a day. I can't really do it. So I'll find some that I respond to, and then others I try to answer. I have a podcast called Ask Altucher. Sometimes I answer on that podcast. And, unfortunately, I can't really respond to everybody, but I try to respond as much as possible. And I hope people don't get mad when I don't respond. It's my fault. It's never their fault. But sometimes I'd rather just write for everybody than write for one person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, clear. And what idiom or figure of speech drives you crazy when people say it? Because there's several which, people keep on telling over and over again. Is there any specific one that irritates you?
By idiom, what do you mean?
Like a figure of speech or something that, a phrase that...
I think that's a hard one. I don't know. No idiom really bothers me that much. People can say whatever they want.
Okay, I see.
I never judge what anyone else is like saying to me. Okay, here's a very small example. Very tiny. Sometimes people say the word lose and they spell it loose, Loose, instead of Lose. This is very common on all the internet message boards out there. For some reason, I don't know why this bothers me.
Okay.
There's no real reason why it bothers me. It just does. Maybe because people call me a looser when they really mean that they want to call me a loser.
Oh, okay. Well, interesting. I don't know. The spelling thing is, I'm a non-English speaker, but very often I too can kind of see many spelling mistakes that English speakers are making. So for me, it's very kind of, it makes me feel good, but at the same time, I'm getting surprised that,
I have because I tend to write very fast and then post. I don't really, I do a lot of rewriting when I post, but before I post, but I don't necessarily spell check or even grammar check that much. So often people will point out to me spelling errors and grammar errors, and then they'll, hate me for it. So I don't really, I don't really pay much attention to when people point out my own spelling mistakes. So, because they're just going to happen.
Yeah, I see.
Particularly if you write a lot and you post a lot, it's just natural that grammar and spelling is going to happen.
Yeah, and I think if we go back to what we spoke about, I think that the story is the essential and important part of all that. So,
Exactly.
It doesn't really matter if there is a small grammar mistake or a spelling mistake, because the message and the story is the core, and that's what people should be looking for. Yeah,
yes.
Well, to wrap it up, what's one question you wish someone asked you, but no one did?
Yeah, good question. I might not know the answer to that. I think people ask often, what does it take to be successful, or what does it take to make a lot of money? But people forget that it's the simple things that really plant the seeds for success. It's sort of like, people ask, what's salt? And they forget that salt is really made up of sodium and chloride. It's the combination of the two. And so almost everything in life is made up of much more simple things. So what's success? It's really a combination of being physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually healthy today. That creates success in the future. That's like the basic elements of competence, the basic elements of having good relationships with people, the basic elements of having freedom of choice in your life. And those things, competence, relationships, autonomy, those are kind of the basic elements of future abundance and success. So I think everybody wants to know, well, what side of the page should I put my button on that more people will click on? But really, the reality is focus on the basic elements first. Like, are you sleeping enough? Are you eating well? Are you hanging around good people and people who inspire you? Are you being creative every day? Are you grateful for what you have now instead of dwelling in regret and anxiety? You know, people forget about these simple things, and I wish people would more ask about the simple things than get mired down in kind of the bad things in their life. Like if someone's in a bad marriage, say, how do I deal with a husband or a wife who never listens to me? Often that's not the correct question. The correct question is, am I getting enough hours of sleep per night so that maybe it doesn't matter so much that maybe there's other ways to express my thoughts and feelings and actions to my spouse than demanding and controlling that she or he listen to me. So people need to focus more on the simpler things that make life better.
Okay. And the very last question before we part, it's many people, from those who found out that we're going to speak together, first of all, they were very surprised and happy for me. And second, some of them approached you and never
I'm
got
very happy for you too.
Back. Yeah. So I was wondering in this, I'm sure you're getting many emails, you're getting many messages, and, what's the thing that will bring higher chances to someone to get noticed by you?
Not by me in general, but in general, if you can offer someone value, the way to build abundance is to create abundance for others. So I know for me, when I am trying to create value for myself, what I really have, nobody cares about how much money is in my bank account. People care about how much money is in their bank account. So if I can tell someone, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to have more success. If I convince them that that's correct, then that's good for them. And then later on, it might create a situation which is good for me. So let's say I'm an investor in a company, and I go to another company and I say, hey, what your company really needs is another company that does X, Y, and Z. And they say, you're right. And I say, well, let me just make this introduction for you. Doesn't matter that I might be an investor. If I can really improve this other person's life, he might buy the company that I introduce him to. And then that creates success for me, and that makes him notice. If I just say, hey, you should buy this company I'm invested in, they may never respond to me. Why should they respond to me? No one's out there to make me rich. They're out there to do what is good for them and maybe what's good for the other people in their life. And so the way you get noticed is to create abundance for others. So Ani, you contacted me, and you contacted me in you told a personal story about yourself and kind of courage it took you to contact me. And also, I'm happy to be on a podcast because I feel like I can spread the word about a message that is very important to me. And so you offered value for me. And that's why we're on a podcast now.
Well, once again, I'm really honored that you've been here, and I would like to thank you once again for coming over and spending your time with me. I really appreciate that.
Oh, I really appreciate it too, Ani. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, it seems like that's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. Please make sure that you spend just a minute for helping me out and leaving a review on iTunes for the podcast, because that will help enlarge the audience and help and encourage and inspire more writers than I'm doing now. Take care, keep writing, and stay being a Right to be Read listener. Are you struggling trying to figure out how to sell copies of your book? especially the first 100 copies? The Author Marketing Institute is offering access to their latest free video course called Selling the First 100 Copies of Your Book. This is the course everyone should have when they started publishing. It goes through all the basics from starting a mailing list to experimenting with different prices. If you follow the instructions in this course, you should be primed and ready to sell your first 100 copies, if not many more. Sign up for free at www.authormarketinginstitute.com.